Hello and welcome to the Futurist Letters Show. My name is Cairo Smith. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Futurist Letters, the journal. I am also the host of the Futurist Letters Show. I today am joined by Frank Kidd, the author. It is just he and myself. Kenny and Lillian are both away on adventurous jaunts. So you might have heard, if you'd like to sponsor the show, just shoot us an email. All the details are at futuristletters.com. And we won't belabor that anymore. We will just jump right into the meat of the episode. Because it's just the two of us, there is no after show episode for this episode. But we do after shows where we chat a little bit about how things went. So if you'd like to become a paying subscriber for just a few bucks a month, you can get access to all the behind the scenes from the journal. And you can also hear us gossip about the show itself in the after show episodes. So that being said, Frank, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Cairo. It's great to be here.
Now, you are an author. I have read some of your work. You're quite prolific. You've been in The Double Dealer, I believe.
Yes.
And now that The Double Dealer is Futurist Letters, that means we actually have in our archives and troves some of your work, which we're very grateful for. If you haven't read any Frank Kidd, go check him out. The last one I just read, which I'm sure we'll get into on the show, is called Medicine Woman. It is a frontier pulp adventure, the kind that they just don't make anymore, but he does. And I'm very excited to talk with Frank about I guess what you'd call the alt-lit scene and its various subsets, as well as Substack and the shape of lit online. So with all that said, Frank, for those who don't know you, fill in anything I missed. Tell us a little about yourself.
Hey, not you didn't miss too much. Author, Medicine Woman, my latest release. I've got a couple more novels I'm working on and that are kind of on ice right now. Also started a podcast, The Frank and Brady Show, which is essentially just an excuse for me to get Brady on the phone and chat about books. So if you're ever
you had a note that I think was on Friday morning. You said that it's so funny that we use podcasts basically as an excuse to get together and make friends. And I guess it's true that a podcast, if you're a little worried about taking someone's time, there's a bit of a value prop there for the guest. Have you found yourself talking to people through your show that you might not have, say, gotten on the phone with otherwise?
I don't think we've gotten deep enough into the show yet. It's just kind of been friends, but there's a few people on Substack, you included. Eventually, I'm sure you'll guess, but
it'll come around. It will.
It does give you like a good excuse to talk to someone on the phone, whereas I think it's a little bit more awkward to just be like, hello, internet friend. Would you, would you like to chat for an hour and a half?
Yeah. I actually had this experience with Rambo Van Halen. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He wrote Hollywood Samizdat, which came out through Passage, and he recently read Scene Box, my latest novel, and he I don't know if he posted something. I think it was a note. He said, "Man, you almost need to start a podcast just to be able to ask authors questions about their books." And I sort of, I said, hey, we can just talk on the phone, Rambo. And I think with that olive branch, we then did talk on the phone. But it's funny that was kind of right along the lines of what you said separately, too.
Yeah. I think it's really an excuse for people to be social, especially as the internet gets smaller. I think everybody's kind of has their own corner now.
Yeah, this is interesting because I think if you were just looking at the numbers, it might be a little counterintuitive, the internet getting smaller. Wouldn't you say that, like, on paper the internet is getting bigger?
Yes, yes, but I think personally, you have like people migrating to Discord. Um, so the communities are almost getting smaller, and more
I
personal.
I saw someone, it wasn't Catherine D, believe it or not, but it was another internet archivist, basically saying that we have these very extensive records of conversations and subcultures on the 2000s and early 2010s internet in the form of private and niche forums.
Yeah,
Obviously bodybuilding.com was like the most famous one, but there were like hundreds of thousands. And this person was basically saying now that Discord fills that social role, there are huge like portions of internet history, like relating to like raids and brigading and subcultures and movements that are not going to be archived and thus are not going to be accessible. I'm not sure if I felt that way. One, because we always, I don't know if you remember, but we used to have like IRC, which was a lot like Discord is now, and that similarly was very ephemeral. Um, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on like preserving internet lore for posterity? Is this even something we should bother with?
I don't know. I don't. It might be a fool's errand to some extent because can you even access some of those old forums? I will say, Grok Deep Search I've used a few times, and it actually links to a lot of those old forums. Uh,
Really?
yeah, especially when you're getting into the weeds on like history and stuff.
Okay,
Um,
so Grok pill me here because you're the first person I've ever say like seen specifically invoke Grok over like ChatGPT or Claude. So why Grok?
I can't speak to ChatGPT or Claude's like more advanced features, but Grok at least would like give you links to things on the internet where you could then go read it where it's pulling from. At least when you use deep search, which I found incredibly helpful because I don't have to just take the AI's word for it.
There is a lot out there that is just too buried for human beings to find, or even like PageRank. It's funny, you think about like Google PageRank, which is like, oh, we're indexing the entire web, but it's a very uphill battle for PageRank to bring to the surface anything that's forgotten, because notoriety is sort of the basis for its ranking. Whereas with an LLM, theoretically, if there's something that's highly salient, it could grab it no matter how forgotten it is, right? If it's in the data set. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Especially for like, I don't know. Do you consider yourself like a Lindy minded person?
Oh, one. Yes, 1000%.
Yes.
Yeah.
For someone who like looks to the past, right? Or like cares about lost or dying arts. There's there's this sort of funny tension with AI because on one hand, obviously there's like slop. We don't even need to talk about slop, like it's obvious.
Yeah.
But there's also like the ability to basically like commune with the past as manifest through these data sets. I don't know. Do
Yeah.
you how do you feel about like the state of LLMs for the culture overall, as a writer in particular?
Um, I don't know. I'm a little black pilled. I kind of think it's gonna they're going to eat all of our lunches in like the most absurd, unexpected way. you know, like
What can you be more specific with that?
yeah, I'll try to be. I mean, I don't know. I think there's a timeline where everybody gets way dumber, so dumb, that like they can't even really appreciate human art to some extent. Um, I think maybe AI can eventually replicate, like a high level literary novel. That might be 10, 15 years down the road. Who knows what it's going to do to like white collar jobs, right? Like what happens when you lay off like 50% of email make work jobs? I don't know.
Yeah.
There's just
I
so many
guess.
like bizarre ways because like okay, so I think a good example is the iPhone came out when 2008. So you look at the iPhone and look at all of the things the smartphones changed. You know, even dating, online dating. And then a second order effect is like nightclub. People stop going out to nightclubs as much. Nightlife kind of dies. So we're very early in the AI thing.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I
think
have no
about.
idea.
I think about the song actually from right around there. I think it was Lady Gaga and Beyonce had the song Telephone. And the lyrics of that song are basically, I went to the club to have a good time and I brought my cell phone, so people from my outside life are blowing me up, and this is completely ruining the experience. I should not have brought my phone. And I always think of that song as like a little prescient because at that
Yeah,
time, the answer was obviously like leave your phone at home. But just 5, 10 years later, you can't. You need to call the Uber, you need to, et cetera, et cetera. And so this phenomenon of basically like being immersed in the nightclub, like it gets collapsed. You can't just be within the environment. Similarly, like I remember reading some article on like the collapse of topless sunbathing in France, which was this like decades, if not centuries old tradition. And people were basically like, yeah, we don't, why would I be topless at the beach if someone could just like come up and take a photo on their phone, you know?
right. Yes.
Um, the like the sanctity of these environments, these recreational environments goes away. Uh, yeah, I wanna really quick before we get too deep into the singularity, just ask you, what is it you write? I mean, I know I talked about Medicine Woman a little, but how, like, if you had to find a through line in what you write, what is it?
That's a really good question because right now I've tended towards westerns and I would say historical fiction. I find attractive more broadly. Um, and then if we wanted to expand that, I'd say like muscular historical fiction, like very. I like pulp as an aesthetic,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like that's kind of a box in some ways that comes with its own implications. Um,
Yeah, it's funny. I don't. You're familiar with A.R.X. Han, I'm sure.
yes,
So
yes,
A.R.X. Han wrote the novel Incel. So he talks a lot about like androgenic fiction. He uses the word as
yes.
a
I love
response
that
to
word.
what he sees as like a feminized literary environment. You just said muscular. It seems like all these terms are sort of dancing around the word like men's. Would you say that you write men's fiction, or would you be hesitant to put that label on it?
No, I think that's exactly what I'm going for. It's the kind of stuff that I like to read, you know, or search
Sure.
out. Um, which even like military memoirs, uh, or like even memoirs from like the old West, where there's not necessarily a plot in a lot of that type of thing. It's very kind of loose, and in that way, memoirs are almost literary, right? Because they're all character driven.
Yeah. Well,
So
we love a primary source. I've been reading. I've just been getting so deep in primary sources for something I'm working on. And there's really no comparison. Sorry, you were saying.
do you care to spill the beans or give
Yeah.
us a hint?
I don't. I guess I'll say the setting, and the setting is basically the first couple of years of the occupation of Iraq, 0304.
Okay,
So a
cool.
lot of sort of Gen X,
Yeah,
like IEDs and Stacy's mom and Humvees sort of
right.
thing.
Yeah,
And for me, I mean, I remember it's right on the cusp where I remember that, but I was a kid, so it's like both living memory and historical for me. And I'm
Yeah.
just eating it up. I mean, this is going to be an eternal fascination of mine.
Yeah,
But
no,
you do more than just read these historical memoirs. You actually then turn around and write original characters, original stories set in the times and places that you've been reading about.
right. Yeah, I try to. I find
And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean I find memoir and autobiographies from those times to be like a great source of anecdotes
Mm.
and also kind of like the point of view of the characters, right? Because dude, even people like even boomers, sometimes no offense to the boomers out there, but it's like a totally alien point of view, right? They grew up in a different world than us. That's
So,
hard
what
to.
generation would you consider yourself? Millennial?
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
I'm pretty firmly millennial. So, like, I just finished Days of Rage, which is that Brian
Yeah,
Burrow.
I want to ask you about this. So TLDR, this for those of us who haven't read it.
So Brian Burrow wrote this book. It's about basically the radical '70s. So it's the Weather Underground, the the Black Panthers, all the different like little left wing radical terror groups that were setting off bombs all over America, which I guess in the '70s you could just buy dynamite over the counter, like at construction companies, and so it was just a different world. And then they were setting off like thousands of bombs a year, all these little groups in
What
capital.
were they bombing? How would they select their target?
So it was a lot of like federal buildings,
Okay.
right around Vietnam. It was recruitment centers, that sort of thing. And like the Weather Underground, they kind of got cold feet about hurting anyone, like about a year
Okay.
in. And so they would call in the bomb threat so everybody could evacuate, and then the bomb that they planted in like a toilet or wherever would go off.
The only
And
other group I've heard doing this is like the IRA would sometimes do this. Did they take inspiration from any other movements? Did it say in the book?
no, no, it didn't
Okay.
really say. And they were for the most part pretty bad at like building these bombs. It was one of those
Bad
things.
at building the bombs?
Yeah, yeah, it was like
Okay.
one of those things where they kind of had to learn, and then once they learned, it was just one guy knew, and he would travel all over the
I
country.
think it was Leonardo DiCaprio, right?
Yes, yeah.
And did you see one battle after another?
I have not yet. No.
It's based on the Pynchon book Vineland, which is about basically the Weather Underground and then like the aftermath of that in the Reagan 80s.
Yeah.
And it's sort of transposed onto the present, which like resultingly means that you have all this like Weather Underground esque activity going on in sort of like an alternate 2000s or 2010s, which it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but
Right. I think it
that's the
suffered from
movie.
that.
Yeah.
From what I hear, I think it suffered from that. I think a period piece would have been
Oh yeah. And
smarter.
we have the proof because we have Inherent Vice, right? Which is another mid-century Pynchon novel that Paul Thomas Anderson did straight in the era, right? And it was magnificent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would agree.
But
Okay. And then why did this all just I mean, we can get into the media narrative element, but like why did it all stop?
Vietnam ending was a big part of it.
Okay.
You know?
That was what they were bombing about.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was like I think that was a big driver. And then, I think as they kept doing it, the revolution never happened, so to speak. Nobody really cared, which was kind of funny in a way. Like it's a very comedic book in one way because it's a lot of like absurdist. It's like these hippies running around blowing things up, thinking they're gonna drive change, getting fake IDs, going underground. and then
So they were trying
simultaneously,
to vanguard a communist revolution, essentially, is what they were doing.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
100%.
And were they supported by any communist governments in this?
From what I can tell now.
That's so funny. Imagine being like a communist revolutionary in the U.S. and the Soviet Union won't even like send you $1,000.
Right. Yes. Yes. Or like a Spetsnaz, to teach you
Yeah,
how to make a
yeah,
better
yeah, yeah.
bomb, you know.
Um, that's funny. Maybe I don't know. What I guess my question is like, well, one, you said you write history, and a lot of what we were talking about was again frontiers, sort of 19th century. Where does history end for you? You know, like was this 70s 80s stuff? Would you call that historical fiction if you were to write in that period?
Yeah, I think it would be at that
Okay.
point. I think you're essentially writing a period piece at that point.
Is there a Frank Kidd Weather Underground novel in the works?
I think there's not. I do think it would be a great setting and great characters.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could even, I don't know, are you familiar with like the old Executioner books
I'm not.
from the 70s? So they're like these pulp novels where this ex Vietnam Green Beret just he mows down mafia every novel because they to get revenge. They hurt his family. And like
Right.
I think you could do something funny um with that sort of idea, you know. Um the thing is they were like these radical terror 70s terror groups were just so ineffective for the most part. Like they were setting off a lot of bombs, but nothing was coming of it, right? And there was a ton of infighting, so it's a lot of the same stuff we've seen on the left today, where you have different
Yeah.
groups infighting for you know who comes first, right? Is it
I will never
feminism?
forget like pictures of DSA meetings coming out. Not even during the pandemic, but like last year, so like 2024, and people just going off in the comments like, why is no one wearing a mask? What about the immunocompromised? Just like creating this extremely like this narrative environment where it's very difficult to present any kind of a unified face. So
Right.
that's
Yes.
not surprising to me at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want
I
to
think
ask you. Go ahead.
no. I do think there's a lot of like dramatic and comedic opportunity in that sort of setting, with those characters. But uh, my real point in bringing that up
Yeah.
originally was to kind of say that it's it's a totally different world, a pre 9/11 type world, right? Because even so, like the FBI at the time was doing black bag jobs, and which are basically just break-ins, right, without a warrant to try and find evidence. That's the whole COINTELPRO. Um,
And how would they make this evidence admissible if it were gathered in that way?
I don't really know. It didn't go.
I know they do
They
like
weren't
what they
too
call
effective either.
parallel construction, right? Where they come
Yeah.
up with some other fake way that they acquired it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and like some of the FBI guys, it was hilarious. They're getting interviewed after and they're like, well, we cleared a lot of people's names this way. And it's like, well,
Like we broke into his
that's
apartment and all he had was a bong, and
right.
so we took him off the list.
Right, exactly.
Got it.
You know, and so I don't know, it was just a totally different world back then.
You're reminding me of how people talk, like true crime people, things like that, when they talk about the world before, like Bonnie and Clyde, and before the FBI. It makes me wonder if we are on this sort of stair step trajectory of increasing police efficacy. If after 9/11 in our lives, maybe there will be the next step up, right? That leads to this even more panoptical
Yeah.
web. Maybe it's already here. I mean, you don't know like how many
I mean, I think
bombers and
Britain
shooters they stop.
Britain might be like the next step up, if we were to look across the pond. sort of
Which
thing.
is funny because they sort of knew in their culture that this was coming. I mean, you look at Orwell, obviously, he's writing 1984 about Britain. I don't think that an American would have written 1984 in that way with those concerns, you
No
know.
chance. Yeah, totally agree.
So it's funny now. It's almost like their nightmare, like through the fear it's now manifesting. This individual who wrote Days of Rage, was this a leftist, or what was their motivation for writing it?
He's just a nonfiction writer. I don't. It was pretty objective from
Mm,
it wasn't political. He opened the book as every good nonfiction writer does and says, I don't have a political agenda, but nobody's really written a history of the radical underground in the 70s. If you go on Goodreads, you'll see a lot of like, this guy is running cover for the FBI, sort of reviews. So,
it's
I'm
sort of
sure he
like
didn't
role
make it.
playing as part of the book, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Okay. And why did you choose this book of all, I'm sure, the hundreds on your list to read?
That's a good question. Definitely our environment.
Hmm.
A lot of political violence going
Did you
on.
start reading this shortly after the Charlie Kirk shooting?
I did,
Hmm.
yes.
That's
Yeah.
a pretty clear through line. I think a lot of people, including me, wrote things or felt things to the effect that basically just we hoped this would not be the start of a wave, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if anything, this book kind of I don't know. I think it could get a lot worse before anything like really happened. The nothing ever happens meme. But
You mean there
which,
could be low levels of ambient political violence without racing to the level of like a boogaloo?
right, yeah.
Okay,
I think it would take a ton to get to a civil war,
got it.
actually.
And I guess even then, I mean, I think about, I guess Lebanon. Lebanon
Mhm.
simmered for a while right on that borderline where it's sort of one step above the troubles, but it's not, like Sherman's March, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a whole spectrum of violence, as leftists often say. Um, there are three. I'm very curious because I would call you an indie author. Do you consider yourself an indie author?
Yeah.
Yeah.
1000%.
There are sort of three tracks that I see with um, highly skilled indie authors, and I'm just going to talk about highly skilled because that's who we have on the show. So that's who's relevant, including yourself. One is they are very actively trying to make it in trad pub, and it's sort of like it's like I'm here in community college, but I'm planning on transferring. Is the vibe that they have. Like they're still shooting for the old media, the big leagues. I'd say like Liza Leibs is one of those very vocally on Substack. Ross Barkan also talks about that. Then you have people who, in the second track, are basically too jaded to really believe in trad pub. They're sort of committed to the indie thing, um, but they still think that the indie thing is a path to glory and acclaim. A lot of people I know, Dan Baltic, Adam Les Reinspect, are sort of in that group, and then the third group basically believe that there is no like literary fame to be had at all anymore. That it's contracted so much that we're essentially, it's almost like we're doing opera. We're really just doing it for fun because it's a medium that's so far past its peak. Now, with all of that, how do you feel like you relate to those groups? Where do you fit in?
Um, Man, that's a great question. Definitely not. So I would love to have a trad pub career, um, but I just simply don't have that type of time, to send in manuscripts and wait for rejections. Um, And then I don't know. So the thing is like I would love any sort of career that allowed me to write all day long, right? You know, I don't even have to be rich. Just pay my bills so I could write. That would be my real goals here. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know that that's increasingly less possible. It certainly feels like. Um, I'm hopeful that I'm wrong about that, but it definitely seems like overall, um, yeah, the paths are kind of narrowing. Even for like TV writing roles, screenplay type roles. It seems
Yeah.
like there's less and less of those sorts of jobs positions, and I don't know. I might be wrong about that. I would love for you to tell me there's plenty of
I think
opportunity out there.
a few things if you want my opinion, because that to me sort of sounds like three with the potential to break into group two with the right hopium. And I think I'm probably more in the one and two side. So
Uh,
I guess I'll share my perspective. TV, yes, is in a contraction. I When I started my career in 2020, I was getting a lot of pressure from my management to go into TV, and for a few reasons, it just wasn't interesting to me. The kinds of shows that I would be put out for, were not to my taste, and I felt like this is going to sound very arrogant. There's no reason, there's no way to say this without it sounding arrogant, but I would write stuff like I was asked to write a quote prestige drama hour-long pilot spec sample script, and I wrote something that was basically transposing the Second Punic War onto this sort of Jazz Age setting. Probably
Love
because
it.
I'd played too much like Civilization or something. It's the kind of thing that like Arbogast would publish. But and I showed it to my boss at the time I was at Niantic, and he was like a Hannibal scholar, and he was like, "Oh wow, this is awesome." And then I was going out to meetings with it, and even people who could tell that it was technically well done, or that
Mm-hmm.
like the emotional beats were there, they almost like didn't even know what to ask because they had no, I guess you'd call it a classical education. They had no basis in anything or even a curiosity that would prepare them to ask good questions. They would just
Yeah.
kind of go, "Well, this is interesting." Um and so I would say like to myself, I would say, "Okay, even if I get hired on this, which I never was, like would I be like creatively satisfied basically being one step up from an assistant under this person's direction?" Um a leader, like, you basically need a fit between a leader and a supplicant or a follower where there's sort of like trust both ways, and
Yeah.
I just never felt that with any of the TV that I was going to go into. So for that reason, I always sort of look toward movies, writing movies. And what I didn't anticipate was sort of the streamingfication of movies, where it would sort of start to follow under the same streaming logic. And two, that when the TV bubble popped, which it did, of course, all these mid-level and lower-level TV writers who had been on a couple shows and were hired out of oftentimes diversity programs or things like that, um, would then be in the queue with you trying to write film,
Mm-hmm.
and have credits their name, and in that way, it's kind of like there's no safe place because the flood just kind of goes everywhere. So yeah, it's pretty bad in film and TV. As for literature and alt lit, um, there's kind of like a Pareto principle going on. You look at the top sellers, and
Mm-hmm.
they're obviously making an insane amount of money still. I mean, Gillian Flynn is, I'm sure, making a lot of money every year. People like that. Yeah, it's not like, yeah, Colleen Hoover. It's not like there's nobody And I don't believe those women write like soullessly to market. I think they write like what they want.
I
It's
actually
just that
agree.
what they want fits with the market, right?
Yeah,
Um, and you, when you have like a guild or something like the NFL, there's this sort of like leveling out effect of salaries, where basically like that money that comes in, kind of supports the mid list. Like with the NFL, the teams all get basically like fixed amount of money no matter how much they suck. And there's no such thing with literature, right? Which means like the pure math of that Pareto principle is like very brutal. But there is still money. It's just a question of carving it out.
yeah,
I guess what I would say is everything looks stupid until it's not. And I would guess that the people in our generations who become the next Colleen Hoovers and Stephen Kings are going to do things that to us seem like really tacky, basically. Whether that be like doing like
AI.
AI TikTok like comic books of their stuff or like starting on like a fan fiction site. You know, you already see there have been how many Draco X Hermione dubious consent fan fictions that
Right,
have been published as original books just this year, right? Like Alchemized is one. Like this is a whole subgenre just of Draco X Hermione like fanfic. So there will be money to be made. It's just a question of like, do you want to? Are you the kind of person who wants to do the kind of things that get you there? And if not, maybe you're better off, writing in the corner with the rest of
right,
us.
right. Like a niche frontier, romance that might be big, but the way I write it, at least, might not capture a huge audience either. There's that element too.
Do you find people
So
being surprised by your work when they read it? Say if they knew you on Twitter first,
um, I don't know.
or is it pretty much what they expected? I mean, what sort of reactions do you get?
Not, not a ton because I
Hmm.
don't. I think I'm still relatively unknown in a way.
Sure.
Um, like you've we've obviously like talked for a while back and forth. But yeah, I don't have a huge following on Substack. I've only published one novel. There's plenty more to come. Um, but yeah, I just don't think I'm that
Still at the beginning. Well,
known.
maybe this is the
Yeah,
inflection point. I guess I will take up that mantle and say, listener, Frank is a very good writer. He's a very smart man, and he puts a lot of care into his work. And I actually think that I was a little surprised because this whole sort of pulp masculine thing, at least when you look at something like there was that, the Man's World
yeah,
magazine revival, a lot of those stories have a sort of deliberate glibness as a reaction to like the Longhouse or whatever you want to call it. Like,
yeah,
we're just going to write like very juvenile, exuberant fiction, and that's not what I found in what Medicine Woman at all. Right? Like, it's not like a Milius's Conan,
yeah.
So that would I would say would be like my biggest surprise. Are you working on a new novel?
Yeah. I actually have a military thriller set modern times. Um, basically about mercenaries killing Chinese fishermen off the coast of Argentina. So it's kind of like a more literary take attempt at a take on like a military thriller genre piece, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. Like genre plot bones, but then a literary approach to the
Yeah, yeah,
plot.
much more like less plot driven, more of a hangout novel almost.
Oh, very
Yeah,
cool. Mercenary hang. I feel like mercenary hangout sort of occupies a big mind space for a lot of people online relative to the amount of content we get for it. So,
Yes, yes. Also, have you ever seen that movie Triple Frontier with?
I know it. It's on my list. I've never seen it.
Yeah, so it's a pretty good movie. The ending kind of like sucks, in my opinion. But as far as like the aesthetics and kind of like the premise, I'm so surprised there's not way more of that genre, if that makes sense. Um, to your point of there seems to be an appetite, but not a ton of content. Um,
I was just reading today. I don't know how much you follow Substack Notes discourse, but there's a very, I don't know if I'd call it catty, but there's a very opinionated cluster of literary discussions that occurs. Just today, someone was going off about the novel Stoner,
mm,
basically saying that it had been astroturfed as a great novel, because like the New York Review of Books had done a
yeah,
reissue and they had paid for all this favorable coverage of this decades old novel to try and shill it as like a classic.
that's
And
hilarious because 4chan's the only place I've ever heard of the Stoner novel.
Stoner, yeah,
Yeah,
and I don't think the New York Review of Books is like astroturfing on 4chan.
right. Yeah.
But someone in the comments basically said, "Oh yeah, and you know what else? I heard the only reason they pushed Tom Clancy was because they wanted to sell more nuclear submarines to the armed force or to the government. The defense companies thought that like if they could like make the Tom Clancy stuff really big, it would be like an ad for the hardware." And I have no idea if this is true. It doesn't sound very true.
That is
It
that's
is true?
a hilarious conspiracy theory.
Okay. All right. I thought you were saying it is true. I was ready to go
No,
down that with you.
I I can't imagine that it's true.
No, I really I do doubt it. But do you do you think there's any intersection of, I guess, like, it's funny when you're writing a frontier novel, all these people are dead, but when you're writing a contemporary novel, and I'm running into this a little with my Iraq thing, where a lot of these people are still alive and like on Facebook, which is a little freaky.
Oh,
Uh, it puts a lot more pressure on like how you characterize them in your work when they could like send you an angry DM. Um, do you find yourself like touching areas of the world where like these things are real? Like, are you going to be in conversation with like mercenaries in Argentina, or like end up in some weird part of social media because of your research on this?
no, that's a good point. I didn't really too
Mm.
much. Um,
That's
and
probably
some of
good.
that's on purpose. Yeah, some of that's on purpose. Because to try and keep like I don't know. I do worry about like voice, like character voice and point of view a lot because I am not a special forces type operator. And so I wonder if like some of my characters' point of views are a little bit too soft in a way, if that makes sense. So, but yeah, as
I
far
don't
as
know.
like
I think that there's like, no matter how much you try and research something, you're always bringing yourself to it too. And
1000%.
I don't think that it's necessarily, you shouldn't strive to eliminate all the like Frank Kidness from your world. It's never going to be 100% real life. It's always going to be imbued with a little bit of your um, sensibilities. And I think that like as you build a catalog, people will keep coming back for that. At least that's my experience.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of my, I guess, my strategy, which goes to your earlier point of what do I write, and hopefully, obviously we've gone from frontier romance to military thriller hangout novel. I'm not really sticking to a genre there. Um, I hope it's like a Frank Kidd novel. You know what you're gonna
Yeah.
get. The same way you could open a Stephen King novel, whether it's
Do you
fan.
uh do you shoot for a certain word count when you write?
I do. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you plot that out, plan that out pretty far in advance?
Yeah. I usually have a pretty good idea. Like this novel, this military thriller novel, I aimed for about 80,000 words, 90,000 words. Um, Medicine Woman, I tried to make about 60,000, came in at like 70. So yeah, I definitely I definitely break things up by word count. Um,
I gotta say, and I respect a plotter as a fellow plotter myself.
yeah.
Your typesetting, not to get too nerdy, on Medicine Woman, I was very impressed. The cover design, the texture, the layout, little details. It felt really um, well executed. Was there someone you brought in for that, or how did you do that?
No, I appreciate that. Most of that work was me. Um,
Mm.
Vellum, which is about $60 for Mac, will format anything in like 10 minutes and make it look excellent. So, highly recommend
Gorgeous.
that. Yeah, and then as far as the cover went, I did commission art for the cover, and then ran it through Photoshop and kind of like dropped it into the KDP templates, and you know did everything else, the typography. But
KDP being Kindle Direct Publishing, which is how a lot of people in the space get their books out there, including me. Even for Scene Books, which was through New Ritual, we still there are
mhm.
just so many advantages to using the Amazon printing network. I know there's a certain amount of I don't know, anything Amazon has a certain sort of déclassé tinge to it. People get a
Yeah,
little haughty,
yeah.
and I do know, like for example, Passage. They don't use any Amazon stuff, and their prints for the most part are really nice.
Which I kind of find annoying, to be honest, because
That
I'm
you
a
have to check out through there. Yeah, that was actually the reason when I started all this. I had my first collection, No Return, which was a mix of short stories I'd written over about 10 years, some
mhm.
of which had been published previously in journals, some of which were unpublished. And I basically just said, I'm tired of waiting. I'm going to get this out there so people who want to read this stuff can read it. And I did all my research on my options, and I said, you know what? I want like the lowest possible friction from click to
Right.
sale.
Yes.
And when I buy something, I go to Amazon. So I assume my reader is going to be the same, and so that's where I'm going to be.
Yeah.
And I haven't regretted it. I mean, how's your experience been?
Yeah. No, I've have not regretted it. I do run into these people who kind of like hate Amazon just to hate Amazon to some extent,
Yeah.
which I think there's some real gripes there, but also I don't think you can be serious in this space and kind of like avoid it too much. Um, I think I think the frictionless checkout, as far as a distributor goes, they're probably the best, in the business.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I never feel like I'm being taken advantage of, and I hope the buyer doesn't feel they're being taken advantage of either. I mean, the prices are pretty reasonable. I will
yeah,
say one thing, and this is again getting kind of into the inside baseball, but the way they structure their ebook sales, um, Amazon has this big cliff where I think you can get 70%, um, roughly 70% royalties on your ebook only if it is 9.99 or less. And if you make it even a cent above 9.99, your royalties drop to I think 30 or 40%, meaning you would need to then have it be over $20 to get the same amount of royalties as an author as you would from having it be 9.99. There's this big trough there. And obviously very few people are going to spend $30, $40 for an ebook. So in a way they're like locking everybody at this 9.99 mark. And I think especially as inflation continues to rip, it's a little frustrating. I mean, I have books that I would price at 12, 13, $15. Um,
right. So I've had an idea for a while. I wonder what your opinion, how this would work, is what if we only did paperback on Amazon and you put like a QR code in the back with a download to a free ebook version. And you just price the paperback at like $15. Would
Brilliant.
would that be
Um,
attractive to people?
yeah, especially because, and I was just having this conversation with Matt and Dan at New Ritual. A lot of people like to buy books as art objects.
Right.
I guess you'd say. I would say there are a few. Actually, the first thing I thought of as a reason not to do that, you already dealt with, which is that there are certain people, like I talk to people who go, "Oh, I need the big text for my eyes," and so I get the Kindle one and I blow it up. So that stops me from like doing paperback only. However, if you have the scan, obviously, then that's fine. I would say one, with the cost of printing, your margins on the paperback probably would not be that different from like the 9.99 ebook. You'd probably have to go more like
Yeah.
$20 and up to actually do better than the 9.99 ebook. The next thing I would say is on paper it would be worse for DRM because the downloadable link could be shareable. However, I've had books like my book Kalanisha Dreaming went up as an ebook with DRM on Kindle, and in under a month it was on like Russian file sharing sites as an EPUB. So I
Right.
don't know how they like strip the DRM off, but it kind of doesn't matter. So in that sense, I would say, yeah. I mean, that sounds sick.
Yeah.
I think if anything, just like try it once, and it becomes like a point of discussion.
Yeah. Like
Like
a
I would say,
special.
if you're gonna do that, go ahead and do it. Write an essay about it as like a think piece. Run the think piece on like Substack, post it on X, and then not only do you have the book out there, you also have this sort of like inside discussion of literary practices running that and this is another thing. It's like, is there a point to like trying to sell to other authors? I actually do think there is. Some people say there isn't.
I think there is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you. That's who we're
I'm
calling to now.
Yeah.
Right.
$16 actually. It's funny for the amount of copies we've sold. There have been like a hilarious amount of reviews and essays, like not just in the comments, but actually like full articles.
Yeah. There will
I would
probably
say
be
like
another when I'd get my write up done. So
I would say like something like just under 20% of sales are represented with like an essay. But I actually think that's great. Like that's like the first wave, and there can be a slow rollout. When getting back to your book, what is your book called, and when can we expect it out?
uh, I think it'll be Once Upon a Time in Argentina.
Ooh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah. Currently shooting for this spring. We'll see. It needs to go to an editor, um, a copy editor. So that'll kind
Well,
of be
respect to you.
the
A lot of people don't even do that. I'm just imagining like Brad Pitt with his harpoon gun on
yeah
the cover with that
yeah
title.
yeah
Um,
yeah. Hopefully it's that sort of vibe. Um, a little bit
no,
fight,
I think
a little
it's
bit.
definitely, having read your first novel. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm going to be picking it up. So, you know, it almost seems placid when we put it this way. Like you write a novel on anything you want with no publisher yelling at you on any timeline. You finish it, you get it copy edited, and then you put it out on KDP. I mean, is are you just planning on doing that indefinitely
For now,
for
I
now?
actually it's funny you bring that up because I think I think people are too much in a hurry to make it, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. In that you let's say you have this next book takes off kills it, then do I need to write another military thriller? To retain that market and that success. I think when you're first starting out and relatively unknown, there's a lot of opportunity to like experiment and hone your craft and do weird things without too many expectations,
Yeah.
and definitely no
The pressure
monetary
of
thing.
the second album, as it were.
Yeah.
Which oftentimes is actually like the third or fourth album these days. I was just saying, my fiance and I are in pre-production on a no budget feature film, and we're developing it together. And it's basically just consists of us sitting in this office here where I am right now, talking about what would make a good film. And sometimes it does, feel like a little lonely or a little like it has a lack of grandeur doing it. But I said the other day, I said, if we do this correctly, this is going to be the last film we get to develop with nobody like breathing down our necks. So we should actually kind of enjoy it. And
Right.
that's sort of how it seems like you feel about your writing a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
Cool. I want to ask about your show, to which I will admit I haven't listened to yet, the Frank and Brady show. How did this come about?
Um, Brady talked me into it.
Now
Um,
tell us about Brady, for those who don't know.
uh, Brady's Brady's a great writer. Um, he has one book out. He has a few more that he's working on. I wish he would write faster.
I would have
Um,
asked him along, but then I would have felt like I was on your show. So I'll have to
yeah,
get him on separately.
yeah. No, I think this was nice. He'd be a great guest separately. But yeah. Brady's co-host. We've been friends for a while. Met through your Discord. Um,
Ever met in Meat Space?
Never. No.
Uh,
100% internet friend. Um, but yeah, we I don't know, a podcast seemed like a good way to kind of build an audience, you know, um, on
sure.
one level, especially nowadays. I also wanted to do it just to get better at podcasting and giving interviews. That was kind of like my secret real reason was practice.
Get the
um,
reps in. Yeah.
right.
It
Yes.
certainly does get the reps in.
Yeah.
This is something I feel like I always end up asking, but I guess it's just because it's always relevant. How do you position both your online identity and your work in relation to like the culture war, if you do at all?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I've definitely been kind of this alt lit scene um, that has political tinges, passage press.
Yeah.
I was in,
Uh,
I had a flash
Conservative, or
fiction.
I guess you'd say right wing political tinges for the
Yeah.
most part. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a flash fiction published in after the war. And then I made it into Man's World with that pulp contest. I had a runner up story, which are both obviously right wing
And this
publications.
was all under Biden, I believe, right? It would have been.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
feel like in the Biden era, there was this very almost like,
I would have
and
never.
it was a little self-aggrandizing because it was never that edgy, but there was sort of an edgy wink of like, look what we're doing, like among these groups. And I feel like it's very different now.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels completely different. The vibe shift is definitely real. Um,
Yeah. So where does that leave you these days?
I try not to be too overtly political with my writing. Um, Obviously, everything I write has a little bit of me, has a little bit of my weirdness too. Uh, you know. But yeah. I think most of my readers will probably come from that side, but I'm definitely not trying to be overly edgy. I'm trying to write good fiction at the end of the day that I would like to
Sure.
read. Yeah.
I think if you reach a certain level of skill as an author in there's like an amount of just like depicting reality as it is that is embedded in that sort of actually like dissolves through these like culture war walls. You know, like a lot like people who can recognize the humanity within what you're writing, like it neutralizes their ability to really, you know,
Yes. Yeah.
come at
I,
you.
yeah, that's another. That's another. I'll bring up memoirs again, but you'll notice when you read like people's accounts as they're going through history, they don't really grasp. They don't grasp the mythology that's going on around them, right? They're very much living human lives, human motivations. Um,
Could you give some
usually,
specific examples of this? This is very interesting.
yeah, okay. So I just finished a memoir, The Life and Adventures of Billy Dixon. Actually, just wrote a screenplay, um, adapting it.
Congratulations, that's
Thank you.
huge.
That's my first one down. So, um, but so he was a buffalo hunter on the plains, right? He ends up, him and 28, like 27 other buffalo hunters end up holding off like 700 Comanches at Adobe Walls, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. And, you know, that battle essentially like broke the back of this wider Comanche, Kiowa, Cheyenne Confederation. And then about 3 years later, you have pretty much all the Indians getting rolled up and put on reservations, basically because of the fallout of this battle. Like the Indians lose this battle, and then they go off and raid and pillage and murder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the Buffalo Hunters actually broke, the treaty because they ran out of buffalo north of the Arkansas River. And so they're like, let's go south into Comanche territory, which was Comanche territory per, treaty. And so, but they're not doing that when they're going south to, you know, basically like cause all of these things where
Yeah.
the Indian way of life, falls apart and they end up on reservations 4 years later. They're going for their livelihoods. They're trying to make money. That's their sole source of income. They're going for adventure. They're just same thing as like the Indian Braves they're fighting against, right? And so
Right.
it's nobody really grasps what's going on around them as it's happening.
That they are knocking all these dominoes down in this very
Yeah,
pivotal moment.
yeah,
This is one thing that I wanted to ask you about reading Medicine Woman, because when you're out here, at least in somewhere like the California coast, you sort of have like two groups of people. You have like people who sort of get really into some pet aspect of um, Native American history of one specific tribe or a group or their origins. And sometimes it's not a pet issue, sometimes it's because they like have ancestry in that regard or something, like that's their heritage. Other times they're just like looking for a cause, and they like basically all of this knowledge is supporting the like whatever land back or sort of like, you know, unceded land narratives, land acknowledgement, etc., indigenous rights, segueing into this progressive political platform for the present or whatever. Like it's all wrapped up sort of in the progressive politics. And then the other group basically just like don't care or think about it at all. And if they're saying anything that's like against that first group, it's basically like completely out of like a shrug, you know? And yet here you are, Frank, like someone who simultaneously has this very, very deep, caring knowledge of these Indian groups, and yet, as far as I know, is not like a progressive rabble rouser. So, like, is this a common type of person where you live? Is this a regional thing? Or are you just strange? Like, how did this happen?
Uh, I don't think it's that uncommon. I think Empire of the Summer Moon. I don't know if you've have you heard of that book? So it's a fairly
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yes.
okay. Yeah, it was big on like the Joe Rogan crowd maybe 10 years ago, and it's about the Comanches. And so I think there's a ton of people that picked up this interest because it is very, it's very cool history in a way. And so I think there is like a whole sect of like history bros. There's a hilarious Shane Gillis video on YouTube of him just like badly explaining like all this Native American history.
Yeah.
It's hysterical, right? So I don't think I'm necessarily that unique.
I guess when you look at the names of some of our like helicopters, clearly that at least there were some people in
Right?
defense who shared this
Yeah. Well,
predilection.
yeah, that's a funny point. Actually, I've talked about this a few times with people, but I think I think like kind of the indigenous being rolled into the fold of progressives is kind of a creation of 70s politics, because before that I think they were definitely like part of the American heritage, right? Everybody has like a Cherokee ancestor somewhere
Yeah.
in a
To the
way.
point where this is a cliche that everybody
Right.
says this. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And you have like Jim Harrison's Legend of the Fall, right? Tristan in Montana. He's more raised by the old Indian Blackfoot that has like a secret stash of scalps that he never shows anybody. Right? So it's very much I think Indians were and Native Americans were like a big part of the American story, and I think that kind of got co-opted by progressives actually in the 70s and kind of identity politics.
I like this because now we have this unified theory of Frank Kidd thought emerging that ties together all the different areas of history you're reading. We just need to get Chinese fishermen involved in this somehow, and then we can like tie the whole thing together. Very, very interesting. And man, I guess for anyone who's heard this and now wants to jump into Native American history, what would you recommend as like the jumping off point?
uh I'd say Empire of the Summer Man would be a
Okay.
great start.
Well, we're only 10 years late after Joe Rogan, but I
Yeah.
guess we'll put it out there for our audience in case you were 10 or
Yeah.
whatever. We have a lot of surprisingly young, like Gen Z
Doing.
listeners. Yeah.
That's funny.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Well, that is all quite exciting. I want to make sure everybody knows where to find you. So I guess tell us if I'm just like opening Chrome or Safari, how do I get the Frank Kidd experience?
Yeah, you should be able to find me on pulpwest.com, which is my Substack blog. Um, the Frank
I
and
guess
Brady show.
technically, Once Upon a Time in Argentina is still Pulp West in the sense of Western Hemisphere. But
Yeah,
if you ever do like a Boxer Rebellion thing, you might need to be Pulp
it,
East for a little
it's
bit.
actually structured as Western. It's very
Oh,
much
great.
the
Okay.
wild bunch with Mercs. So
I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to reading it, and I'm sure your copy editor is in for a treat. So yes, pulpwest.com. Ladies and gentlemen, you can find him on Substack. You can find him on X. You can find his books on Amazon. Frank, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Looking forward to well, one, you getting the recognition you deserve, but also two, you having the space to write in peace in the meantime. So thanks for being here. Listeners, again, if you want to sponsor the show, here's where your sponsor tag will go. And we're very flexible on that. So whatever you're thinking, we can probably make it happen. Just go ahead and go to futuristletters.com and you can email us. This show is on futuristletters.com and on YouTube with video. And you can also get the audio on Spotify and through RSS for Apple Podcasts or anywhere else that you do your podcast RSS. So there's no after show today, but we're glad you stopped by, and we will see you next week. Have a good one, everybody.